أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين شفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين وأصحابه المنتجبين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى قيام يوم الدين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد, السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. We started with a question yesterday as to how can a single individual within a span of 23 years bring about such a total change and a transformation. What was it about him that brought about this phenomenal change, a shift, a full shift that set the Muslim community on a trajectory of growth from nomadic warring tribes to a united nation comprising of Muslims and non-Muslims, from illiterate people to the people who discovered the scientific method of data analysis and building on that. What did he actually do? Yesterday we made a point that the first thing we need to remember is that the Blessed Prophet did not speak out the message. He lived the message. He was integral to the message. It will be wrong to understand the Quran or whatever the Prophet has said by separating the message from the Prophet himself. The Prophet was the message being delivered and in the making. Now, what were those fundamental components of his message that brought about such a full transformation? And in fact, if we were to understand that today, there would be no less than another transformation that can take place within the human community. Now, I need to explain a few things today, but the fundamental thing is encapsulated in one phrase. He made them God-centered, in God-centricity. God-centeredness for the Prophet meant to give a deeper sense of purpose, to awaken the souls to a deeper self, to a purpose that truly awaited them. It was putting a seed within the ground and watering it, and letting the seed do the rest of the work naturally. If you leave a seed outside the ground, it will wither away. You place it within the ground, what happens? It allows its chest to be torn apart for a small plant to sprout from it, and then from there to grow, for a tree to grow, branch out and give its fruits and advance in its journey. That's all he did. He reminded people of their true selves, what you really are. You see, today, we made this point yesterday, we reach out to God for God to do things for us. We want God to secure life for us, to cure our bodies, to bestow us with wealth, to restore our social circumstances. The Prophet never introduced God in this manner. God was very different in the understanding of the Prophet, and he lived this message. The Quran says, مَا أَصَابَكُم مِّن مُصِيبَةٍ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَلَا فِي أَنفُسِكُمْ إِلَّا فِي الْكِتَابِ مِن قَبْلِ أَن نَبْرَأَهَا. No tribulation befalls you upon the earth or within your souls, but that it has already been prescribed within a book prior to the initiation of this earth. The Prophet said, no, in the way of Allah, you will be killed and cut into pieces. You will fall sick. God will deprive you of wealth. And that is what life is supposed to be. Don't be afraid. Face the challenges of life. But through that, attain the fullness of yourself, the real self. This body will wither away no matter how much you try to retain it. Even if they live for 1,000 years, the Quran says they will not evade death. Death will seize them at some point. No matter how long you live, the Prophet said, your bodies will wither away. You will be going on. No matter what kingdom you possess, it will collapse. The mighty galaxy in which you live will come to naught upon its own prescribed time. He will tear away the sky. Everything that you're after shall not remain. Awaken to the truth. The truth is you yourself. When he aligned them with God's centricity, when they became aligned with their true purpose, that made all the change. You see, now, instead of being frightened, insecure people, they faced challenges like true man. The Quran said to them, and this is what the Prophet showed them, that look, at the battle of Badr, you won. At the battle of Uhud, you lost. تِلْكَ الْأَيَّامُ نُدَاوِلُهَا بَيْنَ النَّاسِ. Those events, we rotate between people. One day there's victory for you, and another day there's defeat for you. None of this victory nor defeat is anything to do with you. These are the states of life that you will encounter. You are meant to encounter these states. What is supposed to happen is for you to grow from within and reach to the fullness of your potential. As Hussein says, "O Allah, he who has not found you, what has he found? And who has lost you, what has he gained?" At the end of the day, the Prophet was saying to them, your gain and your failure is within you yourself. And that is the God centricity that he introduced within the minds of the people. So the Quran says, and if you are killed, so what? You're going to be returned to Allah. Isn't that better for you? And if you come closer to Allah, Allah will increase His tribulations upon you. How odd was the message of the Prophet to the one we are following today. We want God to remove tribulations from us. Whereas those people who committed to God faced tribulations upon their chest. With barren chest, they faced the shooting arrows. Look at the Meccans, the first Muslims, the persecution that they faced in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is a rock on the chest of Bilal, and he's saying, La ilaha illallah. His ribs are about to break, and his face is radiating. Think about this. He came to them and he said, no, you are beyond gender, you are beyond color. In his final sermon, what did he say? There is no priority for an Arab over a non-Arab, white over black, man over woman. You're all one and same. That verse that was revealed in Surah Hujurat may have been revealed previously, but on that occasion he read this verse, O humankind, we have created you from a single male and a single female, and we have made you into tribes and nations, so that by mutual interaction you begin to learn that the one closest of you to God is the one who is most God-like and God-conscious. God does not see your religions or your faces or your genders or your colors or your statuses. Your absolute objective is to complete your own self from within. It is then that they started breaking their idols. For now, if Allah wishes me death, then no one can save me. What good is this idol to which I pray to secure my life? If God wants to seize me, the Quran says, you will not be spared a moment. And if God wishes to keep you, no army can take you. And this is how the Prophet lived. So he made them God-centered, and we want to talk about this slightly. Now, when the Quran says, call on to God and God will respond, it did not mean ask God for things, of course. وَاسْأَلُ اللَّهَ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ. The Quran does say ask God of His grace. It is there, and it is a need of ours to constantly ask God so we don't become mindless of God altogether. But this is very deceptive. I'll tell you why. I used to fly to Australia back in the day when people used to listen to me. I'm glad you're awake. It's a long flight. So I wouldn't watch movies and I would pray and do all the things that, a good Muslim does. After traveling to Australia for 4 times in a year, then I forgot everything. I had so much confidence in that craft that is carrying me that I didn't need God anymore. Can you see this? The way our minds are. The Quran says, Ud'uni astajib lakum. Call me, I will respond to you. Not ask me and I'll give to you. Think about this. God is saying, I gave to the Pharaoh himself. He didn't ask me. He said, I'm God myself. Then I still gave him. You don't need to ask God. Do you need to ask your parent to give you things? He takes joy in giving. It's a courtesy. We ask God, it's a courtesy. What can you ask from God apart from God himself? What do you want? The paradise? Of what use is paradise in which my Lord does not exist? Blind is this Arif who goes into Jannah, rejoices with the fruits of heaven and does not find his beloved. Is it worthy of me, this paradise? On the day of Qiyamah, you will see the mu'mineen, the Quran says, with their light streaming ahead of them. They will say, Allahumma atmim lana nurana. O Lord, complete for us our light. Allah nuru samawati wal ard. Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth. Our destiny is beyond paradise. This is what the Prophet was teaching. You are so grand, awaken to yourself. You are so beyond it all. He did not tell them Allah will punish you for doing wrong. He told them, you are so much beyond doing this wrong. You are such a noble being. This is all so below you and beneath you. This is when you take away heaven and hell from the mind of the person. Of what good is this paradise? Think about it. Please think about this. Paradise is a glorified version of a rich life, isn't it? Fruits and trees and rivers, and it's nothing else. It's a prison, a more elaborate prison for the unawakened souls. Read the descriptions of Qiyamah on the day of the descriptions of people on the day of Qiyamah. God asks Isa, Isa, did you tell them worship me and my mother besides Allah? Isa is taken aback. He says, oh Allah, you know what is within my soul. I don't know what is within your soul. Why embarrass me by asking me such questions? I'm an open book in front of you. I've never pretended. I've never hid from you. I've never lied. I've always been open with you. Why do you need to ask me such questions? God asks another one. Did you do any of these things? No, I haven't. But your book says you have. Yeah, but it's been written by your angels. But the scribes are bearing witness, but they are your scribes. At that point, the Quran says, I'll put a seal upon their lips. And that is when their limbs will talk with me. Can you imagine? There's a person like Isa, so enlightened on the day of Qiyamah. And there is somebody like me who says to God, it's your scribes who are writing in your favor. I've not done any of these things. Blind are those who are blind today. They will never wake up. Even in Qiyamah, nowhere else. The Prophet instilled that sense of God centricity, that inner state of nobility to awaken people. So when God says, Ud'uni astajib lakum, call me and I'll respond to you, call me and I will be with you. And that is the objective. If you have God, then you have it all. If you don't have God, you have nothing. But when you have God, what happens to you? You become fearless of death. You do not crave for wealth. Status does not make you, does not break you. The appreciation of the people does not matter to you. Their cursing at you does not diminish you within yourself. Oh Lord, if you find me beautiful in the ugly state in which people see me, then that is the beauty I will acquire. When we go to Hajj on the day of Arafah, we are supposed to become dirty with dust all over us. This is the dust of love. It's the adornment of the soul. This is how my Lord finds me beautiful. And if He finds me beautiful in this way, then that is what makes me beautiful. So once He turns them to God, He liberates them from their insecurities. They are able to break their outer idols and their inner idols. Oh Lord, if you are with me at this point, then I can face that army. If you abandon me, O Lord, then the legions of angels will do nothing for me. And a victory of this world is no victory for me. So this is the sort of attitude he instilled within them. So God's centricity that he gave to them was a means of liberating them. The only thing that drove them to their despicable state in which they found themselves of burying daughters, creating human tragedy, warring, was the loss of their own self. God says, and they forgot us, and we made them forget their own selves and their own reality. And hence, they were in that state of decline. Now, what else God's centricity meant was challenging. The Quran says, and look at the message of the Quran, and he is the one that they find written in their books. يَأْمُرُهُمْ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَاهُمْ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ وَيَضَعُ عَنْهُمْ إِسْرَهُمْ وَالْأَغْلَالَ الَّتِي كَانَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ. And he is the one who ordains them with good and prohibits them from evil. And thereby, he lifts the burdens that were upon their shoulders. And he breaks the shackles that fettered them. What are these things? This is the state in which we are right now, because that is our human condition. You see, when the Prophet came, he said, Islam is minimal. It's just you and your Allah. Practice these practices of prayers and Hajj and fast. Care for the poor, and that's it. Be with your Allah, and that's it. Remember Allah frequently. What the Quran says is, there is no good when you wear your ihram to enter your houses from the rear doors. Goodness is in being mindful of God and enter your houses from the front doors. These are the elaborate ceremonies that the Meccans had. The Prophet and the Quran saw that these are wasteful. These are consuming them. And instead of liberating them in the name of God, they are captivating them even more. So the first thing the Prophet did was, in his Quran, he removed all these elaborate ceremonies and told them, think through it. Of what benefit are these? And you find this within the Quran again and again. Does it make sense? Do you really need to sacrifice to Allah in order to procure the favors of Allah? Do you think God is so petty that unless you sacrifice something to Allah, He will not give you? So people started thinking. When they started thinking, they started breaking their intellectual idols. Think. The Quran is saying again and again, think, challenge. In fact, the Quran was so adamant in challenging the Meccans that it became unsafe for the Prophet. If you read the context of Surah An'am, it was delivered, according to some versions, in one shot, whilst the Prophet sat on the back of his camel. Qul, qul, qul. This is one surah in which the most command of qul, say it, Muhammad, came. It was so emphatic. At that point, the confrontation was at its peak, but the Quran was unrelenting. It was severe in its tone. In Surah An'am, say it, say it, say it. Your sacrifice of meat, your practice of this, that, and they were very, very offended. But what was happening through that offense was that people were waking up. It was a very challenging surah. This is the method of the Quran. Challenge it. Think, and your God will honor you. The attitude that the Muslims have is, we can't think because we are somehow transgressing on the sacredness of God. Whereas God Himself is saying in the Quran, challenge the Quran itself. لو كان من عند غير الله لوجدوا فيه اختلافا كثيرا. If it was from other than Allah, you will find a lot of discrepancies therein. Can the Quran that asks this community to challenge their own theology bar its own people from challenging the Quranic theology? No. The Quranic theology is telling us to challenge its own content. Challenge the Quran, it says. So they began to challenge. They became empowered. This was the whole part of God centricity. You see, today, Muslims have forgotten this. The Christians, the Jews have forgotten this. Which God, I want to ask my Jewish brothers and my cousins, which God can tell you to kill other people, their children? It's in the These are the verses that you find in the biblical text. Kill them all. Kill their children, women, their oxen, their animals, everything. Which God can ordain killing? This is what the Quran is saying. Which God can ordain killing? Think about it. Are you sure God is saying this, or one of you is saying it is in the name of God? Majority of the Islam today is my word in the name of God. No wonder we are in this state right now. Think about it. What did the Quran say? He is the one who sent you, his messenger, as a blessing. You were warring people. Allafa bayna qulubikum. He brought love and respect within your hearts. لَوْ أَنْفَقْتَ مَا فِي الْأَرْضِ جَمِيعًا لَمَا أَلَّفْتَ بَيْنَ قُلُوبِهِمْ. O Muhammad, had you spent the entirety of the wealth of this earth, you would not have brought reconciliation within their hearts. Allah أَلَّفَ بَيْنَ قُلُوبِهِمْ. Allah brought reconciliation between their hearts. Allah's message is so clear in the Quran. Be one. Look at the verse of the Quran. He is able to send chastisement from above you or from beneath your feet. أَوْ يَلْبِسَكُمْ شِيَعًا. Or He can make you into small parties and factions. وَيُذِيقُ بَعْضَكُمْ بَأْسَ بَعْضٍ. And He can cause some of you to taste the wrath of others. Tell me, how many people did the tsunami kill? 100,000? How many people have we killed in Iraq after we went to topple Saddam? 1 million people. No natural disaster has killed more than what human beings have killed. Today, the state of the Muslim is a curse of God. It's not a blessing of God. The way we are fighting with each other, it's a curse of God according to the Quran. The Prophet said, no, put aside your differences, be one. Unite in the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and withstand these differences. Look at how far-sighted this man was. And I'm going to talk about this tomorrow. Say to the people of the book, come, let us be united on the worship of one God. Withstanding their Christianity, Judaism, Baha'ism, whatever else they have, not Baha'ism, Zoroastrianism and whatever else they had. Come on the worship of God centricity. He united people. The Muslims today are in the same position that the pagans were. The only difference is the pagans were in that position through their idols, the Muslims through the name of Allah Himself. This is how we have perverted Islam, unfortunately. So God centricity was a message to liberate. Now, where does the Prophet come in here? The Prophet's physical example, lived example of God centricity. You see, when the Prophet lost someone dear to him, he did not break under the pressure. He felt the emotion. He felt the pain. He shed tears. But then he said, "O child, you belonged to Allah, and Allah has taken you back. You were never mine. Oh Allah, I thank you for the time that you allowed him to be with me. He was yours, and by priority, he belongs to you. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un." People saw this. They saw this God centricity within the Prophet. When he faced an army, a mighty army, I mean, the Muslims were always outnumbered. At Badr, 300 to 1,000 and something. At Uhud, what, 4,000 to 1,000 and something? The Prophet would look at the army and say, "La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah." That's it. And the people would see this. He has not been guaranteed with victory. All he knows that he has to do the right thing, and the right thing right now is to face this opponent and this facing army. And all he does is La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah, and he goes. He's leaving his family behind in Medina. He says, "Allahumma anta khalifati fi ahli wa fi mali." Oh Allah, you're the one I leave behind to take care of my family and my wealth. This is how spiritually he was liberated from within. And they were seeing this. They were seeing a person living a God-centered message. When he gained something, he did not become overjoyed. When he lost something, he did not get overtaken by grief. So they were studying him. and they were seeing his very God-centered understanding and attitude. And they were seeing how he was growing through his challenges. He was making his challenges as a means for inner growth and inner liberation. And that was the true message that he was imparting to them. So they saw his God-centricity. Now look at the way in which this God-centricity prevails upon the Prophet. At the Battle of Uhud, the Prophet did say to them, do not leave your positions that are there, and stay firm. Do not be deceived by the greed of the spoils of war in leaving your positions. In any case, at one point, there was a cry of victory on the side of the Prophet. The archers who were posted at the hill to safeguard the army from ambush or attack from the rear, they left their posts. A few stayed. Khalid bin Walid, at that point, he was the commander of the Meccan army. And he was a great general, we can't deny. He went and attacked, and then the Prophet's band got surrounded in two places, from the front and from the rear. And of course, they suffered a devastating loss. Now here, the people felt that Prophet was killed. So they fled. What happened there was that many of these people went to Abu Sufyan. And they said, and these were the new Sahaba. And they said, and some of the old Sahaba. Not the major Sahaba that we have, but some few people. And they said to Abu Sufyan, admit us within your religion once again. And we are ready to follow Lat and Uzza, the goddesses of Mecca. Then they understood that the Prophet lives. He hasn't died. The Quran says, مَا كَانَ مُحَمَّدْ إِلَّا رَسُولٌ. Muhammad is but a messenger. قَدْ خَلَتْ مِنْ قَبْلِهِ الرُّسُلُ. Before him, other messengers have gone. أَفَإِنْ مَاتَ أَوْ قُتِلَ. What, if he were to die or if he were to be killed, shall you run away? Can you see that? Now, on the back of this event, the Muslim scholars write that this defeat was the biggest victory for the Prophet, because it finally brought home the message of God-centricity. Now, when the migrants, the Sahaba of the Prophet and the Medinan community, when they retreated back to Medina, they had time to reflect. And the verses were coming, that God was going to bring out what was hidden within your souls. Because you felt that if you joined with Muhammad and the new religion, Allah will always give you victory. But that is not the case. Allah will give you defeat. So basically, they were coming to the Prophet, not understanding the message of the Prophet. They thought that the message of the Prophet and the God of the Prophet was the same God that we were worshipping, the strongest God who can defeat the lesser gods. That was the sentiment with which they had come into Islam. They said, what? You want victory by coming to God? There is no success in victory. Success and failure is determined by what you are becoming through the change of circumstances in terms of your growth and connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if you connect with Allah within a defeat, then that is success. And if you lose Allah through victory, then that is your defeat. So it fully changed their minds and their outlooks. And that was the God-centricity that was being introduced. Now, Abu Sufyan, he sees that the Prophet and his army has been defeated. So he has to take a decision. That should I walk into Medina and finish them all off? Or should I retreat and just let them die away? The Prophet is being instructed at this point in the Quran, take up arms and go back and face them. Now these people are wounded. The Prophet and his Sahaba are all wounded. But now with renewed faith, they stand again. No longer wanting worldly victory, but just following God's command. With that God-centricity, whatever He knows is better for me. When they emerged in that wounded state, Abu Sufyan's heart was filled with awe and fear. That what sort of people are these? And the Quran says, on behalf of God, that we instilled fear within their souls. And Abu Sufyan was deterred from attacking again, and he left. This was then the making of the community at that point. How the community started to be made from within. A very God-centered community. So the Prophet lived that message, not caring. He never knew whether he would have victory or defeat. He never knew whether he would live or he would be killed. In order for the message to be a true message. Now you see, if the Prophet had been given those verses initially, that Allah will cause his religion to prevail over all religion, then the Prophet would not have evolved from within, and nor would his community. Because the only thing they would know is, well, we've been guaranteed anyway. The victory is ours, but they were not told. The verses of the Quran were saying, we will either kill you or we will keep you alive. So their minds were always in the balance. They were on knife's edge. And that is when their journeys became God-centered journey. That I can't guarantee my next breath, but I'm going to live this breath in accordance with what is pleasing to Allah and what is righteous as a liberated soul, not as a frightened individual. And that was the whole message. Live your life by the day. Forget about tomorrow. Of course, we need to make contingency planning about tomorrow. Do come tomorrow for the last lecture. I mean, I don't want anybody to think, well, I'm here today. I don't know if I'll come tomorrow or not. That doesn't work with us, guys, yes? We're not the Prophet. He lived his life by the day. And that was the true spirit of God centricity and inner liberation. And the people saw this from him. And they were empowered. It's like Hussein. It's amazing. His story. After all, he was the grandson of the Prophet. He prayed for victory. Anybody who believes in Allah prays against all odds. Even if 1,000 people come in front of a single person, if you have Allah on your side, and Allah says, if I do not decide death for you, nobody can kill you, right? So he prayed for victory. But when he saw defeat approaching him, he said, oh Allah, if you have decided to withhold victory from me on this day, then allow me to come to you in the most wholesome manner. That's the wonderful way in which these creatures led a God-centered life. Today I have my wealth, by tomorrow I won't, but I haven't lost my God. I often say to myself, you wear this ring for protection. Well, the one who puts any potency in there is with you anyway. Why do you need a ring? Wear it as an ornament to make you look nice. But other than that, be with your Lord, be liberated, take it all out. Now, what was the other thing about the Prophet that was so potent and that was so central to what he was doing? That was his genuine care and love for the people. You see, he could never have done what he did unless and until he believed in what he was doing. My attitude towards people is often that they are unworthy. They are too far gone. He goes to a community of people who bury their daughters, who have long-running vendettas, but he believes in them. He believes that no, there is essential goodness within these people, and they have become covered with veils that are alien to their real nature. And how do I awaken that true nature within them? That was his attitude. He used forgiveness as a tool. Imagine, he said, "Qulu la ilaha illallah tuflahu." Say la ilaha illallah and you will be successful. They said la ilaha illallah. They became spiritual people, moral people, and conquerors of the world. I said la ilaha illallah, nothing happens to me. It meant something different to them. La ilaha illallah meant a point of liberation when I give myself away and invite Allah's light instead. So he believed in the people. Imam Ali says about him, Tabib dawar bi tibbihi. He was a physician who cured the sicknesses of the people. He loved the person, disliked the sickness. He always saw the beauty in the person. The Quran also tells him that when they come to you and they say such wonderful things, Muhammad, you are deceived by their beautiful words. Allah knows what is within their hearts. He is that innocent. If you came and said to the Prophet, Ya Rasulullah, I will give everything for God, he would smile. He would have a tear in his eye and he said, may Allah bless you. And the Quran is saying this guy is a liar. But that was the attitude of the Prophet. He loved people and he cared. That is why he was known as the father of the people. A woman in the street could stop him and ask him questions. A lady went to him and she said, my son is grieved because his parrot has died. I'm thinking, you woman, look, not in that way. This man is a statesman, he's a prophet, he has got problems too. I mean, what concern does he have with your son's parrot? I mean, people die and parrots die by priority, get over it. She said, no, you must come home. So he went to the house. Then he talked with the child, cajoled him, made him forget about his parrot. The child began to laugh and then he left. Now this is the Prophet. People had that much confidence in him that we will ask him anything and he will do it for us. Let me just, for the sake of honoring our Prophet, give an example or two. There was a Jewish man who went to him inside the mosque of Nabi and he said, you owe me this much bags of dates that you took from me as a loan. He said, yes, I do. He said, I want it back because the time has come for you to repay it. He said, I don't have anything to give to you. He said, in that case, I will sit here with you and not let you move until you pay it back. He said, you have a right. The Prophet said, you have a right. So he came at Dhuhr and he sat with the Prophet till Asr and the Sahaba were sitting. Asr namaz came, the Prophet prayed, the Sahaba prayed, the man was sitting, the Prophet sat. Now the Sahaba were getting perturbed and angry. How dare he detain the Prophet like this? Whereas he's the Prophet. He's the head of Medina right now. The Jewish person did not say anything. They were giving him sort of threatening looks. Time for Maghrib came. And the man said to the Prophet, your followers are giving me threatening looks. So the Prophet turned to his followers and he said, look, it is between him and I. It has nothing to do with you. You go away, go back to your homes. So they went, came for Isha, he was still there with the Prophet. Came for Subah, he was still there. At Dhuhr, this man said, I bear witness that you are the messenger of Allah. For nobody else could do what you have just done and demonstrated. You have that much authority that you can do anything you want. You can get this wealth as and how you want. You can get your Sahaba to punish me, but you did not do anything. This is a true mark of a man of God. This is how he was. He would love the people, but he would dislike their sicknesses and he would cure them gradually and slowly. And that was the sort of potency that he had inside him. And I know you have heard this incident, and let me narrate this. A person went to the Prophet after the prohibition of consumption of alcohol. And he said to the Prophet, now obviously I've read these things. He said, Prophet, I can't stop consuming alcohol. Now imagine you go to a Maulana and say, look, I can't stop consuming alcohol. The Maulana will curse us to the pits of hell, right? So the Prophet said, well, what can you give up for me? He said, well, I also have a habit of lying. So I suppose I can give that up. So the Prophet said, fine, then give up lying. After a little while, the Prophet met him and he said, well, what's happened? He said, well, I've stopped drinking. He said, and how so? He said, well, after I said I'll give up lying, every time your Sahaba met me and they said, well, what have you been doing? Expecting to hear from me that, oh, I was at jihad or I was in the mosque praying namaz, I had to tell them with embarrassment, well, I've been drinking. And the amount of tanhas I got, I had to stop drinking altogether. We see the Prophet built on small good that people had within them. He recognized that these are unwell people, but they are good people. And he loved them. And like a kind parent, he worked on that minimal good to bring out the greatest good. And that's how he worked with them. And that is what Muhammad Rasulullah is. You know, there's not a man like him. We haven't seen one like him. What a Lord of mercy he was. I mean, imagine the person who assassinated Hamza. He came to him at the conquest of Mecca. He said, I embrace Islam. He said, but do not come in front of me, the Prophet said. You are forgiven. It is not because I do not like the sight of you, but looking at you reminds me of my uncle, and that pains me. What a man. He could have done whatever he wanted to that man. And look at his impeccable, immaculate standards. At the conquest of Mecca, Khalifa Uthman brought a person who had been somebody who used to abuse the Prophet, and the Prophet had given orders to banish him and to kill him at sight. So Khalifa Uthman said to the Prophet, forgive him. The Prophet stayed silent. He said, forgive him. The Prophet stayed silent. He said, Rasulullah, forgive him. The Prophet said, I forgive him. And he took him away. The Prophet said, there was explicit instruction for you to kill him on sight. Why didn't you do so? To the Sahaba who were around him. They said, Ya Rasulullah, you could have gestured to us through the corner of your eyes. The Prophet said, it does not befit a prophet to give deceptive gestures even from the corner of his eye. Look at the impeccable standards that he had for himself. And this is the way in which he demonstrated to them his parental care and his love, to bring people out of that darkness in which they were shrouded to that glorious light. Shows how much he loved the people, and shows that that is the secret today. We do not really need people to tell us that God is going to punish us. We need the God of the Prophet to say that God loves you terribly. God is there to forgive you. Don't carry these burdens on your shoulders. This is what the Prophet said, Qulu la ilaha illallah, I'll wipe it all clean for you. Make that intention. Everything that you're holding there on your shoulders, I'll remove for you. Start again. Make that beautiful commitment. And how beautifully he delivered his message. You see, when somebody asks, what is the most beautiful verse in the Quran? Often people say to those people who have been extravagant upon their souls, La taqnatu min rahmatillah. Do not despair of the mercy of God. Inna Allah yaghfiru dhunuba jami'a. Allah forgives all sins. I would say, no, this is not the most profound verse in the Quran that I have found. The most profound verse I have found in the Quran is another one in Furqan. Do not commit adultery. Do not kill. Do not cheat. For if you do so, you will be punished twice. But if you were to turn to Allah, and if you were to become righteous, then Allah will convert all those previous evil deeds into good deeds. It's not only forgiveness. Allah makes all those evil deeds a means for the increase of light within us. This is the message he gave to them. And he said, you are not ugly. You needn't carry your previous sins that then impel you to do more sins. Make an intention. Reduce your sins. Become righteous. Let the light increase within you. That was the God-centric message that the Prophet gave to them, and how he cured them, and how he brought about a godly community. And the sort of community that he brought about, and my time is over, and the sort of community that he brought about, Imam Ali talks about that community to his people in Kufa. He says, where are the likes of the followers of the Messenger amongst you. Those who stood at night, vigilant in the prayers. Those whose lips appeared dry and peeled in the excessive remembrance of Allah. Those whose foreheads bore the signs of prostration. Those whose stomach shrank through excessive hunger. Where are the likes of those whose face were covered with the dust of humility, adorning themselves in the devotion to God? Those are the sort of people the Prophet produced initially. Now I'm going to give one more example before I bring this talk to a close. There was a Bedouin who went inside the mosque of the Nabi, and he started urinating. Now the Sahaba were appalled because, of course, they had learned that urine is one of the most impure substances. So they went to stop him. The Prophet said, no, don't stop him. Let him finish. The worst thing you can do to him right now is to stop him. Once he finished urinating, the Prophet said, now get some water and spill it over that thing and then explain to him slowly. Imagine. It's a simple thing. But imagine the Prophet in Masjid al-Nabi itself. That is how he was. In any case, we have a hadith within our Sunni books primarily, and the Shias have quoted it secondarily, that the Prophet sat with his Sahaba, and he said, Jibreel came to me last night, and he said, Muhammad, Allah gives you the right to have half of your ummah forgiven. So the Sahaba was startled and frightened. And they looked at the Prophet and they said, and what did you say? He said, no. I said to Jibreel, I am not pleased with this. He said, Jibreel went away. Then he came back. He said, Muhammad, Allah gives you the right to intercede for your community. Sahaba said, what did you say? He said, I accepted. He said, I will do shafa'ah for each one of you on the day of Qiyamah. That is the parental love of this man who came, lost everything, gained nothing, and wants only the best for his own children. Please, if you have any questions, please do ask. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.